Good. Good morning. I'm Dan Mazier, the Conservative Shadow Minister for Health. This morning I introduced legislation that would ban supervised drug consumption sites next to children. Let me tell you why. In July 2017, the Federal Minister of Health approved a supervised drug consumption site on Nelson Street right here in Ottawa. The consequences for the neighbourhood were felt immediately. Sandy Hill Childcare, a daycare just blocks away, watched drug use increase so much that they hired a security guard to accompany children when they visited local parks. Heroin, crack, fentanyl, and meth were all being consumed openly on the same streets children walked. Eventually, the daycare was forced to shut down because the children were no longer safe. On May 23, 2025, the Chief of Police for the Ottawa Police Service wrote directly to the Liberal government outlining the law enforcement was seen around the supervised injection site. He cited discarded needles in public spaces, open drug use on sidewalks, aggressive behavior, public intoxication, and a significant strain on police resources. Adding to his concerns about the site, the police chief wrote, and I quote, "Ottawa Police Service is especially troubled by the unattainable but serious consequences, such as closure of nearby child care facilities due to safety concerns, a situation that is without precedent in our city." End quote. The police chief asked the federal government to consider moving supervised injection sites away from schools and daycares in his letter. The federal minister ignored this request. In fact, the current health minister just renewed the approval for the consumption site a few months ago. If you walk past that site today, you would find used drug paraphernalia all around that area. I watched a parent push their child in a stroller down the middle of the street to avoid a person smoking crack on the sidewalk. Police have told me that it's not uncommon for children to pick up needles and give them to their parents. You let that sink in. And the sad thing is, this is not unique to Ottawa. Canadians and communities right across this country are living with drugs and disorder that cluster around these sites. Parents are shielding their children from open drug use on the same streets where they walk to school. Ironically, when the current health minister eventually visited a supervised drug consumption site herself in Vancouver, she required a police escort for safety. Families living near these sites do not have the luxury of a police escort to take their children to playgrounds. When I asked the health minister at committee how many of the federally approved consumption sites are next to schools and daycares, she could not answer. She could not answer because her own department does not collect that data. So let me explain this for the Canadians watching this today. The Liberals have been approving these drug sites for years without looking at what's next door. According to Health Canada, fentanyl is the most commonly consumed drug used at these sites, accounting for every second visit. Fentanyl is a drug so dangerous that a few grains can kill somebody. Yet, the health minister doesn't check whether a school or daycare is next door. But we checked, and over 80% of approved supervised consumption sites operating in Canada are within 500 meters of a school or daycare. That doesn't account for dozens more sites that the health minister authorized provinces to approve, which brings me to the direct role of the federal government. The Liberals have recently tried to deflect the responsibility by suggesting this is a provincial issue. It is not. Let me make that very clear. This is not a provincial issue. Every single supervised drug consumption site in Canada exists because the Liberal federal government provided a legal exemption through the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. The health minister directly approves consumption sites through Section 56.1 and authorized provinces to approve sites through a class exemption granted under subsection 56.1. This failure to protect children is a failure of the federal health minister. And while I'm talking about protecting children, Canadians should know the federal government has no legal age requirement to access these drug sites. In fact, this is scary, multiple sites openly advertise to welcome minors. That means a teenager in a school next door, God, this just makes me mad, who is curious about trying drugs, facing peer pressure, can walk into a federally approved site and use hard drugs for the first time. Damn it. Bill 272 amends the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act to provide any supervised drug consumption site from operating within 500 meters of schools, daycares, and playgrounds. This bill also applies to sites authorized through the provincial class exemption the health minister granted. And while new evidence shows that shutting down these sites actually leads to more users toward life-saving addiction treatment, left-wing politicians are still refusing to admit that a decade of their drug enablement policies have failed the Canadians they are claiming to help. A peer-reviewed study published in the journal Addiction found that closing a supervised consumption site did not increase mortality or emergency department visits. In fact, the study found that there was an increase in users accessing life-saving addiction treatment. More people getting real treatment is exactly the outcomes Canadians expect. Provincial governments have already acted on this evidence, closing supervised consumption sites that are enabling drug use rather than reducing it. There is clearly a need for federal action. The evidence is shifting, and as more Canadians see the consequences of these failed policies in their communities, that shift will only accelerate. That conversation is coming, but today is about protecting children, and hopefully that every member of Parliament will support my bill. I'm a grandfather myself, and I wouldn't want any of my family anywhere near these consumption sites. I have yet to meet a single parent who says otherwise. Unless you support fentanyl consumption next to children, there is no reason to oppose my bill. Thank you. And now, Mr. Hardy.
Bonjour tout le monde, je suis content d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. C'était beau. Écoutez, merci Dan pour la présentation. Merci aux collègues d'être ensemble aujourd'hui. Je pense que c'est un sujet qui est très important. Comme M. Poilievre l'avait dit à Montréal, près du site de la maison Benoît Labre, il y a plus d'un an, il faut fermer les centres d'injection supervisés sur les drogues dures. C'est une crise de santé publique, mais c'est aussi une crise de sécurité publique. C'est pourquoi les conservateurs veulent introduire une loi pour interdire les sites d'injection supervisés près des sites où est-ce qu'il y a des enfants, les écoles ou des garderies. Il y a plus d'un an, en fait depuis plus d'un an, il y a plusieurs articles dans les médias québécois sur les seringues qui sont trouvées proches des terrains où est-ce que jouent des enfants. La maison Benoît Labre, 80 mètres. Donc, on est dans 80 mètres de où est-ce que des enfants s'amusent. Il y a de la drogue qui traîne dans les rues, il y a des seringues qui traînent à terre. Ça ne fait aucun sens. 2 enfants ont même découvert des pipes à crack, puis ont commencé à les utiliser en jeu. Je ne pense pas que c'est ça qu'on veut comme société. Les parents sont inquiets, les familles sont inquiètes, et avec raison. Les centres d'injection supervisés proches des enfants, ça n'a pas sa place. Il faut que ça arrête. Les conservateurs, ils veulent agir maintenant pour régler la situation. C'est pourquoi les conservateurs, les conservateurs veulent agir maintenant pour régler la situation. La ministre de la Santé a le pouvoir, en vertu de l'article 56.1 de la loi qui réglemente certaines drogues et autres substances, de donner une exemption pour permettre aux provinces d'autoriser des sites d'injection supervisés. Donc, c'est totalement fédéral et c'est à elles d'agir présentement. Les libéraux ont le pouvoir d'agir, ils n'ont juste pas le désir de le faire, on dirait. On dirait qu'ils n'ont pas le désir de défendre et de protéger nos enfants. Il y a aussi un enjeu de santé publique. Et je vais terminer sur 2 choses super importantes. Vous le savez, la prévention, pour moi, c'est excessivement important et primordial. Construire des cerveaux en santé et compétents, résilients, qui auront des stratégies d'adaptation autres que des comportements dommageables, c'est excessivement prioritaire. Travailler sur des approches sensibles à la source du comportement et non seulement sur le comportement doivent être mis de l'avant. On doit commencer à protéger nos enfants et on doit arrêter de juste supporter la consommation de drogue. On doit essayer de traiter au lieu de juste supporter. Alors voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Now we'll take some questions.
Mr. Mazier, so you've identified a problem with the current drug strategy of the federal government and a solution to it, but that still leaves tens of thousands of Canadians addicted to opioids, meth, that sort of thing. What should the federal government be doing to help provinces deal with that?
First and foremost, like my bill says, get them away from kids. What is, it's a
That doesn't really help an addict, overcome their addiction,
and this
getting
is
them
why-
away from kids.
I guess we've had a lot of the proponents from this model can admit that this model has failed. It's failed addicts. It's failed these people that they're trying to treat. I believe Premier Eby actually admitted that himself. So that's the hotbed of this type of experiment that's been going on in Canada. And I know Tamara can talk quite extensively on the damages that have been done to her community. But this is, what are we going to do? It's very clear. We need to move. The evidence is here. We have a new peer-reviewed study, of course, and it is peer-reviewed. It is very credible. It's first of its kind in Canada. And I encourage anyone. It was such encouraging to hear that actually there is hope for treatment. Get the people off of the addicts. Stop enabling them. That experiment failed. We all admit that. But we have to get them to a place where they can get off the addictions trail and then get into a treatment type of situation.
Is there anything in this legislation that you're proposing that would actually get people into treatment or expand treatment options across the country?
This legislation is about getting fentanyl away from kids. Getting the sites, even if sites are still open, they cannot operate within 500 meters of schools, daycares, and playgrounds.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's it. All done? Thank you.